By way of introductions, I'm Ian Stewart, co-director at freetobook, and this is Craig.
Craig, yeah, also director, yeah.
And you'll notice on there we've also got Paul.
Hi everyone. Yeah, very happy to be here. I am business development manager for the UK and Ireland for RoomPriceGenie.
Great.
Great.
First of all, just a little bit of information about kind of our relationship with RoomPriceGenie. We basically started working with them back in September 2022. We've been connected since, and we now have hundreds of hotels and B&Bs on the dynamic pricing with RoomPriceGenie. And that effectively means that there's thousands of rooms that constantly being updated and receiving pricing updates from RoomPriceGenie. So that relationship we have with RoomPriceGenie is very strong. We've worked really well together from the start. And it's nice to look back sort of 3.5 years later and just see kind of, the value that's being created. Definitely a lot of extra revenue for our customers, as well as a lot of time saved, and a reduction in their stress. Because I know managing independent businesses, you're on your own, your hands are very busy. So it's been a situation where kind of we've seen a win-win-win where the benefits are all around for those using dynamic pricing. So just initially, we're grateful for Paul for joining us. So maybe let's just have a quick overview from him about RoomPriceGenie. They're our partner for dynamic pricing. They're the experts. And with something like pricing, you want to get it, as optimal as you can. And this is something that we would never feel comfortable doing ourselves. So we're partnered with some real experts with RoomPriceGenie. I'll hand you over now quickly to Paul.
Sure, thank you very much. So yeah, as a kind of bit of an introduction to RoomPriceGenie. So quite simply, we're an automated revenue management system that helps hotels and hotel groups price their rooms correctly every night. So we use real-time market data and demand patterns and competitor pricing, and the platform automatically updates room rates to maximize revenue. It's designed to be simple and fully automated, helping hotels save time while staying competitive and remaining fully in control. So yeah, that's a quick intro to what we do.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so we thought we'd just provide a wee bit of context initially before we go into the question and answers. So let's quickly have a look at where we are now, and I'll pass this over to Craig.
Okay, hi. I think the first thing that we really notice about pricing is that it's a very difficult thing to do, and that's really because it's difficult to get prices right because it's difficult to know what the price is for maybe for a hotel in Paris for tonight or one in Fort William or Edinburgh. As a guest, I would expect these to be fluctuating, and the reality really is that guests don't know how much a room costs until they do a search for their dates. So if I had a rough idea, it would be a guess. I might have a budget in mind as a customer, but I would also maybe expect the price to be different if I was booking now for maybe tomorrow, or making a booking for the summer, maybe 4 or 5 months in ahead. So setting prices as a hotel is really not an easy thing to do, and doing it again and again and again every day is really very hard work. So I just wanted to maybe share, that kind of that we hear a lot from customers of ours, how stressful it is. And this is a very common reaction from independent hotels. And if you read the quote there, you can just really feel the stress and emotion of this particular hotelier who's doing the pricing every day, never off the screen. They're very high on TripAdvisor, so their standard is really high, and they're worried that they're underselling themselves, even saying that they're a bit terrified to move the pricing up significantly. And this is really where dynamic pricing can help you. It takes away that stress, and it takes away the emotion. And I know that this particular property now, in their first year, they got an uplift of 16% more revenue than they had the year before they had started with dynamic pricing. So they do the odd tweak, but they don't have to spend all of their time in front of the screen. dynamic pricing is really important to hotels, and so is it to chains. So let's just have a quick look at there's a bit of a difference there between independent hotels and chains. In almost every case, we see that hotels in the independent sector are underpricing. And this is because the chains, have a big advantage of technology. They have dedicated staff to make the pricing more strategic. And then looking at the price of the property down the road, which is the strategy that many of the small properties use, is quite difficult, because it's not a good idea to sort of base your pricing on a property down the road. If they're doing bad pricing, all you're doing is following a bad example. So it's emotionally invested, it's cautious, and it's DIY. So it's a big difference between the chains and the independents. So I just have a little thought here, which is something, again, many times hotels fail to pick up on high demand periods. They don't pick up fast enough, and they end up maybe fully booked, but they end up fully booked at a lower rate. And they can say, right, oh, I'm, sold out this weekend. I didn't expect to be, but I could have probably got a better rate. And there's just that feeling that, like, sort of, oh dear, it's a little bit of a fail, and your hard work is maybe not as well rewarded. And the thing that we find with, when our customers use dynamic pricing, is that they often find little pockets of higher demand even within the low season. And as those dates get busy, the dynamic pricing picks up on that, and it starts to increase the prices and raise the prices. So the difference is when you then look at it after that date's gone, and you can look at the prices and you can see they might have started off your low season price, but by the time you were full up, the prices had gone considerably higher. And it feels like, the guests are very happy and you're very happy. So you get that extra revenue. And dynamic pricing is really built to detect those situations, automatically react by changing the prices. There is a very big difference between dynamic pricing and static pricing. So, the obvious part is really that your static pricing is fixed. It just doesn't change. And your dynamic pricing is really fitting the situation and the destination. So it's based on your, your occupancy, but also the situation within that destination. And when you're using dynamic pricing, your prices really are reacting to reality at the time. So you end up making better pricing decisions, and you make more money, really, essentially. There's probably not 100% perfect price in any period, but the system using dynamic pricing, you can get pretty close to it. And this is like just some of the main things, the main drivers, the main ways that dynamic pricing works. We all know and expect, prices to vary for different seasons. There's a high season and a low season expected. And these are parts of common language. Guests are used to paying more when it's busier. If guests are booking close to arrival and the occupancy is high, the system will have made your prices higher. And as your rooms fill up, the dynamic pricing will tend to increase your prices. The system will also check demand for the destination to make an adjustment for high demand dates. And a good dynamic pricing system will also be transparent about how that rate was calculated. So you can see each factor and how that has contributed to the price calculation for any particular date. So let's have a quick look at maybe some of the advantages. The first thing really to note there is that you've got control of the dynamic pricing. So those are the settings that you can change at any time, but you would usually set them up when you start, and there would be like a maximum price and a minimum price, and the system won't go beyond those prices. So that's kind of like the envelope in which your prices that you feel comfortable with. You then get the system loaded with your seasonality and also how much occupancy you want to target. And then in the background, it will get on with adjusting your prices automatically based on the real-time demand in the area and also your booking pace and any market trends. So you're never underpriced or you're never a step behind. You're always ahead of the game. So your pricing then becomes much more logical and structured. and it frees up your time, reducing the stress of trying to work out so many pricing factors yourself, especially if you're trying to do that day in, day out. As a result, on average, we would expect the boost of revenue on about 20%. Some are higher, some are slightly lower, but on average, it boosts your revenue by about 20%. I mean, those are the main areas that we've covered. So I think we can probably look to lead into some question and answers.
Yeah, we'll go through some question and answers, and these are things that we have, commonly heard from customers over the years, and they're very genuine concerns. So it's kind of worth just going through them. And I'll ask the question, and hopefully Paul and Craig will chip in with their expertise. But if we look at one of the common questions we get is, it's a small independent hotel, maybe 10, 20 rooms, and they're saying, is dynamic pricing really for me? I have a guest who come back normally. Should I really be using this, or is it something that maybe only larger hotels need to use?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good question. A lot of the smaller hotels are not sure about that, but they do see the chains, if there are chains nearby, or even when they're booking themselves, they see the way that the technology flexes those prices, and a lot of them are used to it in the airlines. In the past, it was very much only available to big chains, but now with the likes of RoomPriceGenie, they give that capability along with our to give our customers that advantage. So it works for all sizes of property. It's just that their access to that technology is now much more widespread.
Yeah.
I don't know if Paul wanted to, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, I think I would agree with the points you made there. I think previously it's something that smaller properties have kind of written off as something that like I say, the larger room count properties do, or chains. But I think it's even more important for the smaller properties to kind of get on board and sort of adapt and move towards a dynamic pricing structure, because when you have less rooms to play with for a start, if you can incrementally increase by a small amount on a number of nights across the year, that can actually generate a rather large increase on what you would typically make if you had a more static pricing structure, for example. So lots of smaller properties are still leaving a lot of kind of lost revenue on the table, really. So yeah, definitely not just for the large hotels.
Yeah, I mean, there's often with the independent businesses, they feel a loyalty to their guests, with the pricing and having a set pricing structure. But as we've mentioned before, guests are used to seeing prices change, and they're not expecting the same price all the time. So it's available there, and it's the easiest way you'll ever have to increase your bottom line and actually do less work. Would be my kind of view on it. But there's another question here really about how it looks at the prices. And we've got a lot of very good quality hotels and B&Bs and guest house that work with us, and they just wondered, Paul, will it be comparing the prices of those good quality businesses with maybe a business down the road which is not as good, might be a much lower sort of rating. How would it work on that basis?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good question. I think the kind of main differences with RoomPriceGenie is we look at rather than kind of focusing on particular competitors, i.e., a hotel that's just down the road. We actually look at the kind of local market data as a whole. So rather than acting as a kind of rate shopper and saying, that hotel is charging £100 a night, for example, so you should do the same. We actually look at the market trend in general. So by a percentage, for example, how what's the kind of fluctuation there between the prices. So yeah, we don't typically just create a concept where we look at one particular property. We try and look at the market as a whole.
I mean, that's really good, because that kind of like it. A lot of the smaller properties are worried about a specific property down the road, and as I said earlier, quite often if they're not doing the pricing right, there's really no point in following that price. So you have to be like, that's why the advantage with Room Price Genie is that is like, it's looking at the market demand for the area, for the destination, not just individual hotels.
Yeah. So you're getting the benefit of it.
You're getting the benefit of that, I think. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, there's another question here which people ask is just how often are the prices updated? You know, that kind of, is it daily or weekly or, you know, multiple times a day?
Yeah, so it's multiple times a day. So obviously things can kind of change at a relatively quick pace. So any kind of surges in demand, for example. So if an event comes up locally that may have an effect on the overall demand in your area, then a room price genie needs to be able to kind of be able to capitalize on that and not react too slowly. So yeah, the system actually will make changes multiple times every day.
Yeah, and
That's for rates like a year in advance. So it's changing those rates for, it could be changing literally, it could be changing hundreds, if not thousands of rates, potentially in any day. So it's a lot of change.
An example would be, maybe 6, 7 months, forward, you might get a booking in a particular period and it's come in. But, Room Price Genie is looking across your area and it sees larger hotels who've had multiple bookings come in for that date. And it's picking up, the fact that bookings are going into them or there's an event or likely detecting an event in there. And then it will affect, it'll up your prices based on that. So it's something that, you just couldn't really do. Because first of all, you're probably focused on, the next couple of weeks, but also you've had one booking, whereas, the larger hotels may have had 10 or 15 bookings in the space of a day. And it's looking at that kind of pickup in the area. So it's quite, it's
the other thing is it's kind of incremental. So it's doing it little bit by little bit.
Yeah.
It's not jumping from 100 to 1,000. It's doing 100 to 105 or 110 and then, or it might come back down to 107. So it's just constantly adjusting in small increments within that space between the maximum and the minimum. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point. I think a lot of hotels sometimes are kind of have that fear of, oh, we don't want to be, known as a hotel that kind of charges, £250 a night for a room that we normally charge £100 for. It doesn't really kind of look to make changes that are, that kind of different. It's smaller, as you say, incremental changes, which the guest is kind of fully expecting anyway. We see it across lots of other industries. When you book a flight, for example, or you book a ticket for an event, there's always fluctuations based on, demand, time you want to travel. So it's already something that the guests are kind of expecting anyway. So yeah, it's more of a kind of mindset change that the kind of hotelier needs to look at.
Yeah, I mean, that goes again, there was a lot of questions there about the control of setting, the maximum and the minimum and how comfortable people feel with that. So, it's just like, how much control do they have for that? And can they override specific dates if they feel like it's not right?
So, I mean, the maximum is one which is quite interesting because that tends to be, in our experience with our customers, is the one they worry about the most. And they tend to be quite conservative about it. So we always try to push a little bit harder so for folk to be that little bit more, say, like a little bit more adventurous with that high price. So you could be maybe, going to from 100 to 150, but you might say, look, I'll go to 170 as my maximum. And then you just see how often that gets hit. Because the dynamic pricing will not be able to go above 170. But if you're hitting 170 every weekend, then you're thinking, well, maybe it should be 180, maybe it should be 190. So you can see that and be able to, you can see that happening and you can see the bookings coming in at your maximum price and decide. And that's just the same as anything really. You would expect, did I achieve the full value of my rooms? And the guests will still be very happy because they'll know that that's good value.
I think a lot of small business owners, either as a kind of owner or general manager, or even if you have a kind of revenue manager in place. I think a lot of people traditionally in the past have kind of always looked at kind of occupancy levels as a kind of volume of success. So you may look and think, well, we're always fully booked, and see that as, something to kind of shout about and celebrate. But ultimately, yes, whilst it's a good thing, if you could potentially be charging a little bit more for each room and still be selling out, then there's so much kind of lost revenue and potential to unlock there. So it's about getting that kind of balance right of, finding the kind of the right price within your local market that you can sit within.
Yeah, and you do have control to override it as well if
On
there is
any date, yeah.
Yeah, on any dates. If there are specific dates where maybe you're holding an event yourself and that you've set a price that you want, you can override it. So there's a lot of control there. The other question we get asked is really about, lots of these small independent hotels have different rooms, so they have different rates for each room, and will it, handle those, having different rates for each room and controlling those?
Sure. Yeah. So that's something that's handled during the setup process. And each room can be set up to have its own base price, its own minimum maximum, which is really good for, a lot of B&Bs, for example, and hotels may have a very unique room that they only have, one or two of, and they're totally different to the rest. So it's really important to be able to price that room accordingly and differently rather than having one kind of blanket approach. So yeah, that's something that is done within the system as well.
Good. Yeah. And how does it work with the OTAs, if you're connected to the online travel agents?
Yeah. So I mean so when the rates come in to freetobook from RoomPriceGenie, and then they'll be in the PMS in the system. So you'll see your prices, and those will get fed out to the OTAs. So whenever the price changes, from dynamic, when it changes, it will be fed immediately to the OTAs. So the thing there is, like, if you've got like a surcharge onto the OTAs, so if you put a higher price to the OTAs, that would automatically be reflected in that price. So essentially the prices with the OTAs works exactly the same way that it works currently, as if you put the price in the diary yourself.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, just another question here is, are they able, Paul, to trial it and see what it would do without switching it on, or kind of?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things we've always kind of really been kind of happy to offer is an initial kind of free trial period to look at the system and actually be able to see exactly how it works rather than just going through a kind of initial demo with the team, for example. We do offer a 3-week trial. So you can really kind of see it, how it makes its decisions. It shows you, I think we touched on it earlier, but a lot of other kind of revenue systems out there are kind of black box of intelligence where it doesn't really show you how it's making the decisions and how it's calculated a price. So yeah, that's something that's really important that you'll be able to see within the trial period before you make that commitment as well.
Yeah. So I mean, I think you will very quickly see the advantage. I mean, the thing I always suggest is, if you're gonna give it a go, I mean, one of the most important things really is the time when you start it, because if you do it once your rooms are already full, then the advantage is lost. So the thing, we're now in sort of like towards the end of January. So, it's a good time to be thinking about, setting it up, because, you won't yet have sold all of your July, August rooms. If you set it up too late, then those rooms are already sold and the advantages are lost. So that's the one thing. And so the other thing, like that Paul mentioned, there's a free trial. I would always suggest maybe a couple of months added to that, just to get a good view of it. So if you have to pay for a little bit, you pay for a little bit and then you get the view. But I think the vast majority of properties will know within the free trial period whether it's working. And I mean, it will be working.
Yeah. We've got another one here, Paul, and this is just someone who said that they're in the UK and they just wondered, is it available everywhere? They're not in the UK, sorry. Is it available everywhere?
Absolutely, yes. So yeah, RoomPriceGenie is a global company. So we are available, yeah, worldwide. So we support around 1,000 hotels currently in the UK, and then around 4,500 globally. So yeah, it
Okay.
works well with multiple currencies and different markets, etc.
Brilliant. Okay, and then we're kind of coming to the end, but just in terms of setup or getting it, how does that happen in Free2Book, Craig?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really pretty simple. If you're in Free2Book, you just head to the Plus tab, and then in the Plus tab, you'll see dynamic pricing, little advert in the dynamic pricing, and you click on that, and then you just follow the instructions from there. It's really, really as simple as that.
Yeah, we do have a team here that are, fairly well grilled in how that process works, and they do work very closely with RoomPriceGenie as well. So it's generally quite straightforward. I think in terms of questions, that's probably all we have time for. So we're running to the end of that. So thanks to Craig and Paul. I've just got a couple of small things here that I think is probably worth sharing with everybody. Is some quotes that we've had over the last sort of year or so, and they're quite interesting to have a look at, just to kind of get a view of what people think of it. Let's just move on.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is one from a hotel up north, and just clearly, again, it's the problem of being very busy day to day, lots of things on your hands, and you miss those opportunities where you can get a little bit of extra revenue, and adapt to the demand. And again, it's simple supply and demand. So there's nothing particularly clever about the way it works. In terms of what you need to know, it does work really well. And there's another quote as well, just to finish off. This is a hotel that we've worked with for, I think, 15 years. And you've seen there that he's been doing his rates himself and flexing them, but not really as aggressively. And I mean, there's quite an interesting story. I don't know if you
I mean, this particular hotel was one of the first to be using Free2Book, and is always very kind of first to try things out. And he, within a couple of weeks, he's got 5 hotels. He tried it on one of them, and within a week, he had it on all 5 of them. And he was just really quite astounded by the additional prices that it was getting and how he had been underpricing. So he put his maximum up about 3 or 4 times, until he was happy that the maximum was actually reasonable. But what he realized by the end of the year, he had got about 43%, just over 43% additional revenue in the first year. So and also had lost the stress and all the hassle of doing it like on a daily basis, trying to work it out.
And interestingly, his review scores actually went up
His review
with
scores
his prices.